Hey everyone, today we're going to start chapter 6, the muscular system. And with what we're going to start today, it's going to sound a little bit like review because we actually covered a lot of what we're going to talk about today when we covered tissues. So let's first introduce the muscular system. It says the essential function of the muscular system, or of muscle in general, is to contract or shorten. This is actually a very unique characteristic that sets it apart from other body tissues that we learned about, such as epithelial tissue, connective tissue, or nervous tissue. Now, muscles are responsible for all types of body movement and can be viewed as quote unquote machines of the body, which means they're going to be in charge of a lot of our gross movement, but also movement inside of our body, such as moving food and other digestive products. Now, there are three basic muscle types found within our body. The three muscle types are skeletal, cardiac, and smooth, and we're going to talk about each of these three individually and how they differ in not only their cell structure, but also where they're located in the body, and then how are they stimulated in order to contract. Let's first, before we start talking about the differences between them, talk about a few similarities. One thing to note is that skeletal and smooth muscle are both elongated, which other words means that they are stretched. These muscle cells are often called muscle fibers because they are very long and they're very stringy. So elongated just meaning long. Another similarity is that contraction and shortening of muscles is due to two types of microfilaments. And we're going to learn about these microfilaments, but if you want to fill it in here, they're called actin, and myosin. And then the last is all muscles share some terminology that we're going to see. For example, the prefixes, if you ever hear myo or mice, like mycium, these are going to refer to muscles. And if you ever hear the word sarco, that's going to refer to flesh. This is a picture that is taken out of your guys' textbook. You guys all have access to this, but it helps compare the skeletal, cardiac, and smooth muscle, and we're going to be talking about these. For example, body location. How do they all differ? Their cell shape and appearance, and how each one of them look underneath a microscope. We're also going to be talking about the connective tissue components and how do they differ. For example, what layers they are made up of. We're also going to talk about the regulation of contraction, whether it's voluntary or involuntary. The speed of the contraction, whether it's slow, fast, or very slow. And then if there is a rhythmic contraction as well. So let's first start with skeletal muscle. Well, skeletal muscle fibers are packaged into organs called skeletal muscles. So remember, these fibers are cells, and cells are going to make tissues, and tissues are going to make organs, such as our muscles. And these are going to be found attached to your skeleton. Most skeletal fiber muscles are attached either by tendon to bones, but you can also find them attached to cartilage and your skin. Now, skeletal muscle cell shape or description, they're going to be considered large, cigar-shaped, and they're multinucleate. These are actually the largest muscle fibers in our body. These muscles are also striated, which means they're going to have stripes, and this gives it an obvious appearance. We see these stripes. Also, this type of muscle is known as voluntary because we have conscious control over it. Our nervous system has control, and we can say for us to move our arms, move our mouth, we can tell our body to pick up something, kick our leg, etc. We have control. Note the speed of the contraction is slow to fast, so we can have very quick, jarring movements, or we can take our time and slowly reach our arm out. Couple key words to remember when we're thinking and we're remembering about skeletal muscle are one, skeletal, so it's attached to our skeleton. It's striated, it has stripes, and it's voluntary, which means we have control over it. Now, one thing that's noted in your notes is it asks you to write down the connective tissue components. That blank is going to actually be, if we're talking about skeletal, these are the connective tissue components that we're going to write down. Epimysium, paramysium, and endomysium all make up skeletal tissue. So let's kind of go into detail about these different types of connective tissues that make up skeletal muscles. Well, skeletal muscle cells are surrounded by connective tissue. And we are going to start very, very small all the way out to superficial. So we're going to start at the very smallest we can and talk about an individual muscle fiber. Each of these fibers are enclosed by a type of tissue called endomysium. Remember, mice means muscle. Endo just means inside. I always think of en as an enter. Then we have several of these muscle fibers bunched together into something called a fascicle. So I'm actually going to look down here where it says fascicles. These are a bunch of muscle fibers grouped together, and this fascicle is actually wrapped around with another type of connective tissue called perimysium. And then what happens is several of these fascicles are bunched together, and these bunched together fascicles are actually binded to something around called epimysium. I always think of like EpiPen on the outside of the leg. So this is located on the outside. This binds together several fascicles and actually covers the entire skeletal muscle. So if we were looking at this picture, here is a single muscle fiber cell. It has a epimysium on the outside, endomysium on the outside. Here it shows the endomysium covering and in between each of the individual muscle fibers. Then if you have several muscle fibers grouped together, that's going to make your fascicle. So right here it's pointing to your fascicle, and then it's wrapped into a little bundle through the connective tissue perimysium. And then if we look at several fascicles bundled together, the outside is going to be the epimysium. Now, the epimysium of skeletal muscle blends into whatever connective tissue attachment that it's making. For example, tendons, these are cord-like structures. They're mostly made up of collagen fibers, so they're pretty tough. And they're often going to cross a joint. Because of their toughness and small size, it actually allows them to provide durability while also conserving space in your body because there's a lot going on. Aponeuroses, these are sheet-like structures, and these also attach muscles indirectly to bone, cartilage, or other connective tissue coverings as well, such as your skin. Now let's move on to smooth muscle. Smooth muscles are located and found mainly in the hollow visceral organs, and visceral organs are going to be things like your stomach, your urinary bladder, and your respiratory passages. Now, if I was going to give a description of smooth muscle, I'm going to say that they're going to be very spindle shaped. They taper at both ends. They are uninucleate, which just means one nucleus, and they're called smooth muscle because they have no striations or no stripes. One thing to note about smooth muscle is that this is involuntary. We do not have conscious control over them. They are controlled by our nervous system, hormones, and chemicals in our stomach, in our body. The whole function of smooth muscle is to propel substances along a pathway. So, for example, our food down our esophagus or through our intestines. These contractions are very slow and very sustained, and so they slowly move food through our digestive tract while our body's digesting it. So some key words to remember are visceral organs. So these are going to be organs in our abdominal cavity. So a lot of our abdominal organs. Non-striated, so no stripes, and involuntary, we don't have control. Now, smooth muscle, the connective tissue component, is this actually only made up of endomysium, that inner connective tissue that encompasses muscle fibers. Instead, these smooth muscle fibers are actually arranged into two layers instead of into fascicles. One of these layers run in a circle and the others run longitudinally to it. So I have a picture coming up of that. Now these layers are going to alternate, and this allows them to contract and relax. So as one layer contracts, the other one is relaxing and vice versa. This allows the size and shape of the organ to change and help propel things through the digestive tract, such as, again, moving food, emptying bowels, or even emptying your bladder. So here is what I mean. We have one that's going more of a circle. So you see the cells making a circle. And then the other one is more longitudinal. So you see that it doesn't form that circular shape. We are going to lastly talk about cardiac muscle. Cardiac muscle is going to have striations, or in other words, it has stripes. So similar to skeletal muscle with stripes there. However, unlike skeletal muscle, it's involuntary controlled. It's going to be controlled through our nervous system and hormones within our body. Cardiac muscle is named after the region where it is found, and it's only found in the walls of the heart, only in the heart. These are uninucleate cells, so these have one nucleus. But what's something that gives away cardiac muscle compared to skeletal muscle is that they have gap junctions in them called intercalated discs. And these allow muscle cells to communicate. So if your heart sends a shock or a signal to tell the rest of the heart to beat, they all beat succinctly in one steady movement. Now, this is a very slow, steady rate set by something called a pacemaker in your heart. And when we get to the cardiovascular system, we'll talk a little bit more about the pacemaker. This type of tissue is composed of endomysium arranged in a spiral or figure 8 bundles, and this is attached to the fibrous skeleton of the heart. So here we have the cardiac muscle fibers located in more of a figure 8 spiral bundle. Now, to end up this section, we're just going to finish out by talking about, well, now that we understand 3 types of muscle tissues, let's talk about their functions. Whereas all muscle types produce movement, whether it be gross movement of our skeletal system, movement of our heart, or movement of things through our digestive tract, there are other important roles that muscles play. So, for example, skeletal muscle, so we're specifically talking about skeletal muscle, has 3 other important roles. One of them is to maintain posture. It allows us to sit upright and maintain our position. And we're constantly fighting against gravity when we're sitting up. Our muscles are constantly working. Muscles are also used to stabilize joints. Again, remember, joints are where 2 bones meet. And then the last thing is our skeletal muscles actually generate heat. Whenever our skeletal muscles are working and trying to make more ATP, the product that it gives off is heat. And this skeletal muscle actually allows us to do another important function, which is maintain a normal body temperature. Now, muscles such as smooth muscles also have other functions as well. They form valves that help regulate the passage of substances through our body. So we're going to learn about several valves when we get to the digestive chapter, and these valves are often called sphincters. They also help dilate and constrict pupils in our eyes to let light in. And also, they make up the erector pili muscles in order to contract. Now, this term erector pili should sound familiar. These are in our skin, and they help produce the goosebumps that we see when we get cold or frightened. And then lastly, a couple other things about the skeletal muscle to wrap it up. They also form valves, but these are going to be under voluntary control, and they help enclose and protect a lot of our internal organs. For example, our abs protect a lot of our abdominal organs. And that's the end of this section. Let me know if you have any questions, and I hope you guys have a great day. Oops.